We're hooked up around. We're just turning it on the speaker now.
Okay. Yes?
The Rav is on the speaker.
Okay. All right. Chag Sameach to everybody. Tonight is the night of the Hilulah of the Ari HaKadosh. And before we begin to understand and receive some of his enlightenment this evening, because as we know that the death anniversary of any tzaddik is merely a clue that on that particular day they return and provide us with information that during their lifetime, for whatever reason, they did not complete. And now we have the opportunity to connect with them on this most powerful day for their revelation of information that, as I mentioned, could not, or for whatever reason, was not included in their particular writings. There is one very similar comparison to the death of the Ari HaKadosh and Rabbi Shimon. And according to Rabbi Chaim Vital, that in the cave of the Idra Zuta, the greater Idra Rabbah, the greater assembly, where when Rabbi Shimon left the cave in Pekian, where he had acquired all of the knowledge together with his son Rabbi Lazar from Moshe Rabbeinu and Eliyahu Hanavi, who both came to him on that level of where Rabbi Shimon and his son were, meaning the level beyond the realm of illusion, inasmuch as the Zohar states that tzaddikim do not die. All that takes place is the fact that a wall or a curtain appears between them and us. And so that curtain, just as curtains crop up in our own lives, when things right before our very eyes somehow remain concealed until some later date, when either we have the opportunity to take advantage of that which was concealed, or sometimes it takes years later and then we say, how come I didn't see that before? Because there is included within this wall of Satan, where the seat of this illusionary reality is situated in the rational mind of our consciousness, although most of the world is under the impression that I'm from Missouri, which indicates that I would like to see that which exists, or I do not believe that which I do not see. And we know today that, unfortunately, that is exactly the habitat of Satan, because he places us into a setting where our perspectives, where our understanding of things around us should be limited. And so we've come to realize today that our rational mind has the capacity of maybe 4 or 6% of the totality of what could be perceived. But he is so powerful, Satan is so powerful, that rarely can we surrender our rational consciousness and become truly free thinking people. We believe that we are free-thinking people when we raise questions of, well, I don't see it. But that is not indicative that we have the full freedom of thought. That thought is confined within that 4% of rational consciousness. That rational consciousness is what prevents us from seeing things in a broader perspective, in a quantum perspective. It prevents us from seeing tomorrow. It prevents us from combining the past with the future. And so before mankind can achieve what we think of as Mashiach, or that we think of as Tiyat HaMetim, restoration, that before we raise our consciousness beyond the rational consciousness, beyond the 4%, then mankind cannot collectively remove that wall that Satan has created, a wall that is metaphysical. And just as the Ari right at this moment is present here with us, although we cannot see him, nevertheless, he is here because he did not die. But if one says, but I'm from Missouri, and why can't I see the Ari if his presence is so strong, and there are people who can feel it? But I'm from Missouri. And our answer to that man or that woman from Missouri is that your 4% rational consciousness never will see beyond even those matters which pertain to the physical reality. Unfortunately, remain concealed. We cannot, for the most part, not everyone, Kabbalists, this was not a feat for a Kabbalist, but he could see very well with a connection what's going on in the other side of the globe. Not difficult. It is not difficult, but we do not understand. The rational mind cannot grasp. How can my eyes travel 12,500 miles from here? I can't even see what's doing 4 blocks away from here, let alone 12,000 miles. And yet, the astronaut can see half the globe with his eyes in another dimension, and he is beyond the limitation of the rational mind, physically and even mentally. And so, the Ari HaKadosh, if we do not accept it this evening, and certainly we are not part of a cultish 2,000 years of history. The reason I say cultish is because in Judaism the rule is you don't ask, you either accept or you leave it. We are not of that persuasion. We have never been cultish. We will not tolerate culticism, which says surrender your mind. But we do say surrender your 4%. Surrender the limited mind. Surrender that part of us that creates this fragmentation, that doesn't permit us to see beyond the Dalet Amot, as the Talmud says, beyond a 4 or 88 area of space. So the Ari HaKadosh says, Rabbi Chaim Vital, that in this Idra Rabbah, when Rabbi Shimon came out from the cave with his son Rabbi Lazar, with this fountain of knowledge of the Zohar, and sat with 8 other students in this cave, and when the Ari HaKadosh went to visit this cave, to connect, as we do, as the center is at this very moment, connecting with that place called the Idra Rabbah, because this evening already we have had the good fortune to connect with over 300 people at the Ari's Keva this evening. They were touching it and and we made the connection directly with the Ari HaKadosh. We were there. And he sat, and the Ari HaKadosh sat in the place where Rabbi Shimon, some 1,600 years before him, sat and taught the Zohar for the very first time. So we know from Rabbi Chaim Vital that the Ari HaKadosh was a nitzutz, was a spark of Rabbi Shimon, and therefore what Rabbi Shimon in his Zohar could not bring the understanding of the Zohar to the layman, that was left for the Ari HaKadosh some 1,600 years later. And so this was Rabbi Shimon returning again, but now returning as the Ari HaKadosh, and both of them, and this is the part that we will commence this evening with, both of them chose to leave the day that they left. Can a man choose the day he leaves? Well, if he's not dying, any man can leave a certain area whenever he chooses. For people like the Ari HaKadosh and the Rabbi Shimon, they could leave, meaning they could create this wall because the time had come, and there was a reason why the time had come for them to exit from this world. To exit from this world. Why did they choose the particular days? What we see immediately as a similarity between the exit of Rabbi Shimon from this world and the Ari HaKadosh was that Rabbi Shimon left this world on Lag BaOmer, which was right smack in the middle of the Omer. And the Ari HaKadosh goes on to explain in his Shar HaKavanot, in his Gates of Meditation, and explains just what this day of Lag BaOmer was about. ובבוא יום ל"ג לעומר, אז נתגלה קטנות בית של אמה, שהוא שם אגדתם אשר באמה. והנה הוא חילוף שם אלוקים, אשר הוא בחינת רחמים. בסוד אלוקים חיים. That this day of Lag BaOmer, while for the Jewish people at the time of Rabbi Shimon, 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva were inhumanely slaughtered in this period, and therefore we have taken that period to mean an encapsulation of din, an encapsulation of severe negativity, and along came Rabbi Shimon to break this hold that had captured the atmosphere of all of civilization year after year from the time of creation. This period did not originate with the slaughter. This period of negativity did not originate with the slaughter of 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, but on the contrary, from the time of creation, this period, the second day of Passover, or the 16th day of the month of Nisan, until Shavuot, was considered the period of Omer, the period of negativity, the period of concealment of the light force of God. And therefore, all of the negativity that throughout the ages, since the time of creation until the time of Rabbi Shimon, was an encapsulation of negativity. And therefore, we recommend and suggest that people do not enter into new businesses, new ventures, etc. during this period, because it is a period of negativity. However, the severity of the negativity was broken because Rabbi Shimon turned this Lamed Gimel La'oma, because that also was an opportunity established from the time of creation. that there would one day appear on the scene someone known and called Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who would take this Elokim, this din, because the name Elokim is a name of God, but it indicates, like in a bulb, electricity can flow through a positive pole and through a negative pole. Does that make the light force negative? No. It becomes manifest as negativity within the light bulb. So too, Elohim becomes manifest as negativity. However, Rabbi Shimon, with his knowledge that he had received in the cave in Pekian, now was able to convert this energy into one of Elohim Chaim, right smack in the middle of this encapsulation of negativity. And so we also find the Ari. These 9 days, starting with Rosh Chodesh, which was on Saturday, and during this period of 9 days are considered highly negative days. And Rabbi Shimon explained why they are considered negative days, because the month is negative. The month is negative. Why is the month negative? Is it actually a negative month? No, you have learned. You have learned that what takes place during the month of Av and Tammuz as well, but more so in the month of Av, is because the sun, which is the channel for the raw, naked energy of the light force of God, and therefore the Hebrew month is known as Av, Father. Father meaning the provider. This month, and therefore it is known as the month of Leo, the month of the sun, because it is king. What do you mean it is king? The king provides supposedly for his subjects, whatever their needs might be. He provides them with their sustenance. This is the reason why all the planets rotate around the sun. Why do they rotate around the sun? While science may not raise that question, we know the reason, according to Shabtai Danilo, because the sun has all of the beneficence that each and every single planet requires. And each and every single planet requires its particular dimension of sustenance. And therefore they all rotate around the sun, because the sun is the Father. It is the provider, like God. We term God. Although God is supposed to be compassionate. Why is this month a month of negativity? And the answer is it's not a month of negativity. But we do refrain from joyous occasions. We do refrain from entering into new ventures, etc. Why? Says the Zohar. Because the Shekhinah is inoperative in this period. The Shekhinah is inoperative in this period. Well, so what if the Shekhinah is inoperative? What the Shekhinah does, and this is the purpose of the Shekhinah, it provides, from the word to shachen, to rest. It creates a means by which this infinite sustenance, this infinite light, this infinite beneficence from God, from the sun, too much exposure. So we have sunglasses, suntan lotion, to harness, not to thwart, not to reject the sustenance, because the sun is the greatest healer. Hashem merapeh, says the Talmud, the Zohar, and prophets. The sun heals. And yet we're always constantly thinking of, look, the sun can chas v'sholem create skin cancer, the sun over an exposure, but it's always the overexposure. But if we take proper precautionary measures, then we can prevent the overexposure. and then we can receive this sustenance. The Shekhinah serves as that purpose. The Shekhinah serves as not a buffer. Even a buffer would be the wrong word. It serves as a methodology by which this force, the light force of God, is harnessed, usable, that we can make use of it. So actually, these 9 days should be very powerful days. But unfortunately, only until the last 20 years, 25 years, is the study of Kabbalah reaching the masses. Now, while we can understand from the methodology of the Ana B'Koach, the Zohar, other systems incorporated within the study of Kabbalah, provide now the average layman with this information. But before that, the rule was this period is negative, and therefore you do not enter into a new venture because you will be drawing negative consciousness, negative energy into that new venture. And so the safest course was, says the halacha, to refrain from new ventures, etc., so as not to incorporate the severity of the negative consciousness that prevails in this period. However, we do have, as Rabbi Shimon, as the Ari HaKadosh, had the system by which they can turn this extreme negative quality of the 9 days of Av, or the Omer, in the case of Rabbi Shimon, convert this negative period into one of a harnessed nature. And so if one feels confident that he has risen and raised his consciousness above the illusionary realm, these days will be the most powerful, can be so positive. But for the most part, to take that chance that we have achieved this level of consciousness. But we do benefit from this period by virtue of the Ana B'Koach, etc., so that we harness to some extent this very negative period. And the death of the Ari HaKadosh also is smack in the middle of these 9 days. The first 4 days of Av, and the next 4 days of Av, and there are 9 days. And he passed away, the Ari, when I say passed away, I mean that's right. He passed away from the scene of the consciousness of people. But he is here, and he chose to leave on this day so that he can break this encapsulation of negative energy. What do we mean negative energy? But it's positive energy. But that he can break this lack of information. Light force is not evil. The light force of God is not evil. But yet look at the chaos it had created. Temple number 1, temple number 2 was destroyed, Inquisition was signed, many other decrees that not only for the Jew in particular, but for all of mankind in general, suffered because of what took place in this month. Are we then to consider this month as being negative? Yet it's the month of Av, the month of compassion. A father has compassion for his children. This is the term that we give to God as Father. This was the name that Abraham 4,000 years ago gave to this month, the name of Av, Father. And yet look at all of the chaos, tragedy, suffering, and pain that emerged during this period. It was only because from the time of creation, says the Zohar, culminating with the 9th day of Av, Satan has his field day. In fact, the one singular day that he's in total dominion is on the 9th day of Av, says the Zohar. Does that mean he can rule? No. when the Ari HaKadosh passed away in this day, as Rabbi Shimon converted the negativity of Omer to Elohim Chayim, the Ari HaKadosh, with his leaving the observable reality that we know, he too broke that encapsulation that began since the time of creation. And therefore, this period is not negative, and we must understand that. This period that we refer to as negativity, I said, well, look, Temple 1, Temple 2, Inquisition, even the Holocaust, decrees took place. The final solution took place in the month of Av. The decree or the conclusion of this was the final solution also took place in the month of Av. Isn't that an indication that the month of Av is negative? And the answer is no. These are merely results of a period that is negative. Because no physical, just as we have always understood Jerusalem is a holy city. You ask most people, why is Jerusalem a holy city? Well, the Holy Temple was there. But nobody's, like the Zohar says, and raises the question, why was the Holy Temple there in the first place? So the answer is that no physical result, no physical event will ever determine it can point towards a metaphysical cause, but it is not the cause. Physical is always the result. That which becomes manifested on a corporeal level is the result of prior thought, prior metaphysical events, etc. And so from the time of creation, this was designated as a highly compressed period of energy. And if that energy is not controlled, then what will result is an overload, short-circuitedness, etc. And that's what the Ari accomplished by his leaving. And therefore I quote a section of the Ari from the Shar HaGilgulim, which is similar to the story of the Edra Zuta, the time when Rabbi Shimon passed away. This is Rabbi Chaim Vital relating to his son Shmuel Vital. Siper li harab Yitzchak HaKohen Zal, Rabbi Yitzchak, who was a Kohen, told me this. Ki be'et petirat Mori Zal, at the time of the petira of my teacher, meaning Rabbi Chaim Vital is discussing the passing away of the Ari HaKadosh, ki yatsati me'etzlo, when I walked out from the room of the Ari HaKadosh, nichnas hu etzlo, this Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen, who was also a student of the Ari HaKadosh, he walked in, says Rabbi Chaim Vital, when I walked out. And because the Ari was not well, Vayivka lefanav vayoma, and Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen wept before him and said, V'chi zu hi hatikva shahayinu kulanu mitavim b'chayecha. Is this the hope that we had all been seeking while you were here with us in your lifetime? Lirot tova v'torah v'chachma gedola ba'olam. And the Ari said, Lo silkoni mi'olam hazeh kodem zmani. I will not leave this world before the proper time. V'odenu midaber imo, and while he's talking with this Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen, Shol alai, and he asked me, V'amar, Hechan halach Chaim. Where does Chaim Vital go? V'chi b'shah kazot halach me'etzli, v'yitzta'er ma'od. Did he leave me in this time? And he had much pain, the Ari HaKadosh. V'hevin midvarav, and this Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen understood from the way the Ari HaKadosh was talking to him, Ki haya birtzono limsor lo eze davar seter, that he wanted to share with him some very deep secret. Azamalo manaseh mikan v'helech, what will we do from now on? Because I'm going to leave. Vayomen, and he wanted to leave, and the time came for him to leave. One might ask, why didn't he wait for Rabbi Chaim Vital to return? Vayomer, and the Ari HaKadosh said, Tomer lechaveirem mishmi, that from now on, lo yitasku klal b'chachma zu shelimaditem, you are to refrain from studying in this wisdom, the wisdom of Kabbalah that I have taught you. You are to cease from continuing to study Kabbalah that I have taught you. Ki lo hevinu ota karui, because you have not understood it as well as you should have. Vayavo chas v'sholom lidei kfira v'ibud nefesh. And much damage can come if you continue to study this, because you are not capable at this point in time to understand. Va'amnam harabi Chaim Vital levado yasok bo levado bilchisha b'seter. Only Rabbi Chaim Vital, and it is interesting, while there are many other works on Kabbalah, such as Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, the Ramak, who wrote also a complete understanding of the Zohar. Nevertheless, his teachings did not become manifest. The teachings that were provided by the Ari HaKadosh to Rabbi Chaim Vital is what we glean all our information from. So is the fact. All of the students of the Ari HaKadosh assembled and studied again with Rabbi Chaim Vital, not studying the works of, not that they were not permitted to study the works of Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, but they did not. Vayomer, and this Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen said, V'chi chas v'shalom ein od lanu tikva, all of we students, aside from Rabbi Chaim Vital, does it mean that we have no tikva, no hope of ever acquiring a proper understanding of the study of Rabbi Chaim, of the Ari HaKadosh? Vayomer lo, and he told him, Im tisku, if you shall merit, ani avo lachem v'lamadchem. If you will merit, I will come. I will come to you and I shall teach you. Vayomer lo, ech tavo v'talmideinu achar shata niftar ata me'olam hazeh. And this Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen asked him, but how will you come to teach us after you have already departed from this world? Vayomer lo, and the Ari answered him, Ein lecha esek b'nistarot, ech tiyeh bi'ati lachem. Do not question Do not become involved. How I will become known to you. But how I will become to you, im b'chalom, im b'hakitz, by flashes, im b'mireh, visions, I will return. How are the curtains removed at that moment? That suddenly, as we have all experienced one time or another, some more, some less, that suddenly there's a flash and everything like lights up. You understand the matter that just a few moments ago was so concealed, so difficult to understand. And then there it is, as if a curtain was removed and everything there is right there before your eyes. That which you couldn't see, had no inkling that it even existed. And so the Ari made it very clear to Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen that he would come back. Except how, and how these flashes and why they came at the time that they did come, that remained a secret. V'tekef Amalei, and immediately he told this Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen, Kum tzei maher, ki ata kohen. Now I mentioned that this Rabbi Yitzchak was a kohen, and if the Ari HaKadosh passed away, the kohen would not be permitted to remain in that room. And the Ari knew that he was now going to leave any moment, and he said immediately for him to leave the premises. V'igi azmani, my time has come. Ki ein pnai lahariach b'shum davar, because I have no more time, lahariach b'shum davar, to extend any of the thoughts, any of the studies that I have been sharing with all of you students. V'yatsa maher, and this Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen went out quickly. V'terem sheyatsa miftan habayit, from the not only the door, but it was just like within the realm of the entrance of the house. Patach piv v'yatsa nishmato b'nishika. He opened up his mouth, and his soul left with a kiss. Now there is a commentary by Rabbi Shmuel Vital, the son of Rabbi Chaim Vital. Who actually wrote all of the writings. In other words, the Ari himself did not write the information that he had shared with the students. He had transferred this information to Rabbi Chaim Vital, and Rabbi Chaim Vital then shared this information with his son, Rabbi Shmuel Vital, who actually recorded all the writings. And so he writes here an addition. Amar Shmuel, At kan higia liyadi bekuntresim kol ma she'ira la'abi mori im rabo zal. All that I have here has come to me through kuntresim, means manuscripts. Everything that had occurred to my father and his relationship with his teacher. Miyom dato oto ad yom shenifta l'chaye ha'olam haba. And all that took place between my father and the Ari HaKadosh, meaning that he was not present at that moment, and Rabbi Chaim Vital never left the presence of the Ari. The 3 years that he studied with him, he never left his presence. But for those few short moments those few short moments that he left the presence of the Ari, and the Ari passed away at that moment. Says Rabbi Shmuel Vital, Kimo kein irali im Abba Morizal biyom petirato. And strange as it may sound, that's exactly what happened the day that my father passed on. I also wasn't there, and I was in his presence all the time. But for a few moments that I left was when he had left. And that indicates what has been stated here, that the Ari HaKadosh returns. He returned, as we know, he returned to Rabbi Ashlag, who could never have written what he wrote, because the explanation on the Zohar is with the study of the 10 Sfirot of the Ari HaKadosh. And so we know that the Ari had come to him, because he could never, as a human being, could never have written that which he wrote. And therefore we assemble tonight to study different writings of the Ari, with the hope, as Rabbi Yisroel said, does that mean we have no hope? But we do have hope, says the Ari, because I will come. Sometimes, and that was also implied when he said, I have taught all you students, and yet during my lifetime, I could not share with you a proper understanding of that which I was teaching you, other than Rabbi Chaim Vital. However, after the Ari passed on, he then returned to all of the students and shared with them the same study, and at which point now they would begin to understand. In this respect, it differed from the time of Rabbi Shimon, and I would like to share this thought with you. When Rabbi Shimon passed away, in the Idr Zuta, that's volume 16, in the Idr Zuta, when he revealed more information, Amar Ababa, Lo Gamar Hamor HaKadosh Lomer Chayim, the Mor HaKadosh, the holy lamp, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, did not complete his words to say Chaim, because he was discussing the verse Kisham Tziva Hashem et Abracha Chaim Ad Ha'olam. And he was also discussing Orech Yamim Vishnot Chaim. He was discussing different aspects of life. Different aspects of life. And he did not complete in these verses the word Hayim. Ad she'nishtachachu devarav, until his words became whispers almost. Vani katafti, this is Rababa. Rababa again, just as Rabbi Shmuel Vital actually wrote down the words of the Ari HaKadosh, so too Rababa, the writings of the Zohar, the actual writing was done by Rabbi Abba. as Rabbi Shimon, not by Rabbi Shimon himself. Rabbi Shimon shared this information with the students, of whom Rababa was one of them, and it was Rababa that actually did the writing. And so Rababa is stating here that I was writing and writing, v'chashavti lichtov od, and I was writing, v'lo shamati, and suddenly I don't hear anything. V'lo harimoti roshi, and I did not raise my head, ki ha'or haya gadol, because the light was so great, the illumination was so intense, v'lo hayiti yachol listakel, because I just couldn't look. B'toch kach nizda'azti, and at that time I began to shake. Shamati kol hakoreva omer, and I hear a voice, not the voice of Rabbi Shimon, but a voice saying, Orich Yamim Ushnot Chayim, long days and years full of life. Achakach Shamati Kol Acher Chayim She'al Mimcha. Again, a voice saying, finishing this verse of Chayim She'al Mimcha, a verse in Tehillim. What does Rabba want to relate with this incident? The same idea, I believe, the same idea that the Ari had mentioned, that he was Rababa waiting to continue writing, and then suddenly, no longer are the words from Rabbi Shimon coming forth. And then suddenly he hears the completion of the thought coming from a voice. Coming not from Rabbi Shimon, but from a voice that obviously he did not recognize, or that he would have said this was the voice of Rabbi Shimon, to indicate to us again, and that is why we follow the same procedure in the night of Lag BaOmer, the night that Rabbi Shimon passed on. A night that their voice continues. It's a night that they return to fill us with information that maybe we couldn't glean directly from their writings or directly from what they had said. And then Rabbi Abba continues, Kol hahu yoma, all this day, this entire day, lo nifsak ha'esh min habayit, v'lo haya mishi yagia elav, and nobody could approach him, k'lo yochlu, machmat sha'or v'esh hayu misavivim oto. Kam Rabbi Elazar beno v'lakach yadav v'nashak otam. Here Rabbi Elazar, his son, took his father's hands and began kissing them. They felt that they wanted to cry, but they couldn't. Rabbi Elazar beno nafal gimel pamim, and his son Rabbi Elazar fell on his knees 3 times, v'lo yochol liftoach piv, and he couldn't open up his mouth. He was speechless. Achakach patach v'yama, And then he said, Avi, Avi, my father. Gimel Hayu, there were three of us. B'chazru l'sha'er echad. There were three great people in the land, which was Rabbi Lazar, Aviv, his father, Rabbi Shimon, v'zikno Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, and his grandfather, or the father-in-law of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. V'ata nisha'er Rabbi Lazar yatom mizikno, umi Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai Aviv. And now I, Rabbi Lazar, remain an orphan from my grandfather and from my father. Minisha echad bo'olam. Acha ata now, acha shenistalek ha'ilan hagadol hazeh. And after that, this great tree, meaning his father, Rabbi Shimon, left. Shetachtav haya mitalim chayot hasadeh, ubanafav yaduro of hashemayim, umazon lekol bo. And while my father was alive, the animals, the beasts of the field, could roam, live amongst people. And there was never a problem of a balanced sustenance for the entire world. Here we see that Rabbi Lazar was there present at the time that Rabbi Shimon left. Here, Rabbi Shmuel Vital wants to tell us that the Ari HaKadosh, at the time he was passing away, his student was not there. I was wondering, why wasn't he there at the time? We have to understand that Rabbi Chaim Vital, chosen to be the only student of the Ari HaKadosh. The Ari himself stated that all the others could not fully understand that which he was teaching them. Only Rabbi Chaim Vital. And in fact, the Ari said to Rabbi Chaim Vital that I have come back to this world again only to teach you, for you will be the only one that will carry on the teachings. And yet, contrary to the event of Rabbi Shimon's passing away, his son was there. All the students were there. And here, at the time that he left, Rabbi Chaim Vital was not present. But I think, I haven't seen this anywhere, but I think that in the case of the passing away of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, the students wept because they said, who would now provide us with this wealth of information? And Rabbi Shimon himself said that this information would remain concealed for a very long time, and the matter of fact is that until the Ari HaKadosh, and certainly until the time of Rabbi Moshe de Leon, around the year 1270, meaning about 1300 years following the departure of Rabbi Shimon from this world, nobody knew that there was such a thing as a Zohar. Suddenly, out of nowhere, came a Kabbalist by the name. In fact, Rabbi Ashok says that he believes that he did not even understand the Zohar, but that suddenly someone from nowhere comes and brings the Zohar to the forefront. But it was not until 250 years later that the Ari HaKadosh came upon the scene and now provided the world with this information. The time of Rabbi Shimon, all the students were there. And that information remained concealed for almost 1,600 years. But everyone was there. All the students were present. When it came in the case of the Ari HaKadosh, his one student, the only one, as contrary to Rabbi Shimon, his students, Rababa, and his son Rabbi Lazar, who studied with him in the cave, all were present. But what happened? Where we might have expected this knowledge to have continued, it suddenly became concealed, but to the extent that the world for 1,300 years did not know that a Zohar exists. And there is still a mystery as to how the Zohar came into the hands of Rabbi Moshe de Leon in Spain. There isn't no clear explanation, or whether in the metaphysical realm or on the purely physical realm, of how he came into possession of the Zohar. However, the Zohar itself as an instrument was still something that remained concealed until the Ari HaKadosh came on the scene. And I believe that what the Ari was trying to teach Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen was that information that is to remain in continuity must undergo a paradox. And it is a paradox. Where the students were present at the time of the death of Rabbi Shimon, that study ended. Here, where the one student who was the bearer of this information would not be present, and therefore the information became public property. When I say public property, there were more people involved in the study. It was only, unfortunately, until the year 1750 that the laymen were all permitted to become involved in the study of Kabbalah, although it again took some 200 years until Rabbi Ashlag before the people became involved in Kabbalah. So the Ari made it very clear for us that he was returning, and he would return more so on his Yom Hilulah, on the day that he disappeared, because that's the paradox. The same paradox as we have by Rabbi Shimon. Students being there, the study does not continue. With the Ari HaKadosh, the student not being there, the study continues. There was no longer a period of darkness. There were students, Rabbi Avrom Azulai, and subsequent Kabbalists, the writings of which are included in my teacher's compilation of Rabbi Isaac Luria, the volumes that we have today, thanks to my teacher. The paradox, the day he disappears is the day he returns. A paradox. But so the entire world is a paradox. And B'ezrat Hashem, if we can lift our consciousness to this paradox, to understand that I'm from Missouri is the greatest ploy that Satan has brought into our lives. And B'ezrat Hashem, b'zachut of the Ari HaKadosh, we shall overcome that rational Satan consciousness. Amen. Amen. We'll have a break for about 20 minutes, and we'll continue learning throughout the night.